want to give a few extra minutes for people to get here. So it's 5:55, so I'll start. Alrighty, before I get into the lecture, there's a few things I wanted to mention. Paper 2 is out. I put the question for paper 2 on Blackboard. Oh, Slink. Hello. That's all right. I got you. I'm just saying that paper 2 is out on Blackboard, so you can look at the question. It's just one question, which is basically arguing a point, and the question is, religion is violent, or is religion violent, or does it become violent? So you have two sides of the question. Someone might want to argue that religion is inherently of itself, in and of itself, violent, okay, that it does not become violent, that it is violent, and that's why it is violent, because it is. Or you might want to argue that no, religion is not violent, but it can become violent for maybe certain political reasons, or economic reasons, or emotional reasons, whatever position you want to argue is fine. I got you. Give me 1 second. It's fine, but just remember that it's the related question. So you're talking about, if you take the first issue and say, well, I'm going to argue that religion is violent. Is religion violent? Yes, Dr. Dunn, religion is violent. But you might also want to address how it does not become violent, because if you're going to argue that it is violent, you don't want to argue that it's not motivated to violence. It is itself violent. You understand what I'm saying? So the two questions are somewhat interrelated. Yes, Ms. Lynn.
As for her opinion on religion is violence, or can we use first person?
No, you can use you can use first person, because this is you giving your opinion. Thank you for asking that. She's asking, since you're giving your opinion, can you use first person, or should you talk in the third person, like Link thinks this and Link, which could sound a little bit weird if you talk about yourself that way, although I sometimes do, as you know. But no, you can say, I think, for example, that religion becomes violent because people are in a poor situation, they're poor and they're angry, and so they, it motivates, and they're also religious people, so it motivates them to become violent. So yeah, you can use the first person, that's fine. Okay, so it is out there. It's 500 words this time, 500 words, which is roughly a page, maybe a page and a half. I just want to remind you that next week, October 13th, there should be someone coming from the library to give a talk about library resources, and hopefully it should be, I believe, geared or directed towards what you'll be writing about for the paper, I think. But I think, on the other hand, nevertheless, it will give you a broad understanding of what resources are available at the library, and hopefully I want to make sure that they address the Metro Writing Studio. Because if you have, the help is there for you. You're paying your money, okay? You're paying money to come here. And so use the resources. If you're going to pay for it, you might as well use the resources that are available. And one of them is the Writing Studio Center. They have tutors, they have people who can sit down, look at your work. They're not going to tell you what to write, I don't think. But they can look at it and say, okay, this paragraph doesn't make sense to me, or maybe this is misspelled, and they can help you out that way. All right, if you have the time. I understand some people don't always have the time. If you can make the time, it's a benefit. So she'll be here. Her last name, I forget her first name. Her last name is Evans. Now I'm going to forget it. Tarajian. Now I'm forgetting it. It's three last names. It's Evans. I think Tarajian was the third one. Oh well. Anyway, well you'll know on next Thursday. Sorry about that. The third thing on violence, I might, even though the schedule says that I'm going to devote, I believe, one class to violence, I might have to devote more, because there's just so much information about it as I've been doing my own reading and research. So I might actually do 2 classes on violence rather than 1, just so you know, just so people aren't confused, which means I'll have to change the schedule. And if I do that, then I'll send out an email just noting the change. And finally, quiz number 2 is due tomorrow, yes? Ish. You have until 12:15 a.m. on Saturday morning, first 15 minutes of Saturday, to get it done. I have noticed that some people have gotten it done, but some people have not. I just recommend, I don't know what your schedules are, so I don't know what's going on in your life, but I do recommend try not to wait the whole week to get it done. Just, get your notes out, look them over, and do the quiz, because just telling you my experience with students before, it doesn't usually seem to benefit when people wait to the end. What it usually does is freak people out because they feel they have to rush and get it done, and then sometimes something happens, like their computer falls apart, and then there's a whole thing. So just be aware of quiz number 2, it is due. Alrighty, now let's see, let me try to remember where I stopped. I believe I stopped here. Alright, and let me just go over quickly the attendance to make sure I have everybody. Storga, no. Sean J. Grady, no. Philistine, no. Not yet, at least. Okay, so I'll put this over here. Okay, so I went through these definitions. Yeah, I was here before the quotation. Okay, so I'm not going to go over again this. Okay, I already talked about how it is a science. It is scientific, but not a science. Okay, but what is the nature of religious studies? What makes it different from other scientific fields, like say anthropology or sociology or biology? Okay, what makes it different is that its focus of study is human experience itself, and I would say ultimate human experience. Again, that idea of ultimacy, that the natural sciences, we could call them the physical sciences, focus on the physical world. They focus on the material world, and that's as far as they go. Astronomy does not tell you what occurred or what exists beyond the universe, because its capability is not to do that. It looks at the material, physical universe of stars, black holes and galaxies and matter and energy, all those things, but it doesn't go beyond that. It doesn't look for ultimacy. What's the ultimate source of these things? Even beyond the Big Bang or something like that. We don't, that's not a question for astronomers. They might think about it, but it's not for them to really think about. So religion, the data of religious studies, is that ultimate question of human experience. Where did things come from? Why are things here? What are people doing with that question of ultimacy? They're making religions. That's what they're doing. So it is dealing with subjective data. Some of this might be repeat, by the way, but I'm going to repeat it anyways, just to make sure that I covered it. So it's dealing with subjective data, okay? You have an object, the object of study, but I'm the subject. I'm the I who is doing the studying. I'm the subject of the sentence, all right? So I am studying something, some object, or looking at it, or dealing with it in some way. And so my analysis, my study of it is subjective, okay? I'm having thoughts about it, I'm seeing it, I'm perceiving it, the object, but I'm also having thoughts about it and analyzing it and coming to decisions and judgments about what it is or what it does. So that's what we mean when we talk about things are like subjective. Oh, that's just your subjective thoughts or your subjective morality. Usually when people say that, usually when people say that, oh, that's just subjective, they usually mean like that's your opinion. And that's true in a certain way. But it's also, people mean it maybe in the sense that it's not really true knowledge. It's just your opinion. It's not really true or something. Well, no, that's okay. So that's usually how people use it. But in this sense, you have a subject who is the actor, and you have the thing that is acted on, the object. Okay, so objective knowledge means that you have accurate knowledge of what the object is, what it is and what it does. So it's objective. You're saying what the true nature of the thing is. Subjective, though, is how it appears to me. I'm the subject. I'm the one who's doing the looking or the touching, and how does this appear to me? So we're dealing with subjective data. We're dealing with human beings who are subjects, who do things, see things, taste things, hear things, smell things. So the data that we're dealing with is subjective. And because of that, the data, the information can have a variety of interpretation. It's not objective always. It's not always the same thing, the same object that is being described. People might experience it differently, okay? And this is when we come to the idea of the sacred. I talked about the idea of the sacred. This kind of, or ultimate, I should say ultimate reality. Let me say ultimate reality. This force or power of meaning that people see that is transcendent and ultimate in the universe. Subjects will experience that object differently. And so the evidence is going to be different. It'll be various. There'll be a variety, a plurality, one might say. Religious studies has a lot in common with other science-like, quote-unquote, science-like fields like anthropology and sociology, psychology, history, archaeology. These are science-like, okay? They have their methods which are patterned on the natural sciences, biology, geology, astronomy, I mentioned. How? Well, they might use experimentation to some extent. They might have laboratories like the natural sciences, hypotheses, come up with theories that they try to prove, just like the natural sciences. But there's a lot more subjectivity with these areas because, you know, the math doesn't lie. A lot of anyone who's done the natural sciences, a lot of it is number crunching. You get numbers, okay? You know, from chemistry, you mix chemicals or you work with chemicals. You have to deal with, you know, like pH or acidity, and it's a number. It's, I mean, certainly something is it an acid or a base in chemistry? Something an acid or a base. Water, for example, is a base. But you know that from numbers. You have to do with numbers. So a lot of the sciences, the natural sciences, have to do with numbers. And so do these other fields, but numbers are numbers. 2 is 2, 4 is 4, 9 is 9. The numbers pretty much remain the same, and you can deal with them that way. They're objective in that way. Whereas with religious studies or something like psychology or sociology, there's a lot of subjectivity. Hence, in these fields, usually they're going to be this. You interview people, you talk to people. So, you know, how did you feel about that when someone said something nasty to you, for a psychologist? Or what did you experience when you had this experience of God in your life? Okay, you can't test that thing. You can't put someone's experience of God or the effectiveness of prayer in a laboratory and test it. You see what I'm saying? Why it's science-like, but it's not like a hard science, like studying rocks or studying the stars. Okay. Hear a little voice saying, "Move on, Dr. Dunn." Okay, moving on, my little friend. But because they are related, they do use, and I already mentioned this, but it's here in my notes, so I'll mention it, a lot of the methodologies and techniques. So in religious studies, you won't really necessarily have religious studies laboratories. Although there are some people who trying to do that. There are some branches of religious studies where they try to scientifically, like the hard sciences, study religion. And how's that going? I don't know because I don't follow it. But they try and set up laboratories. I don't know how you set up a laboratory to study prayer, but one example that I remember from years back was a study, actually a couple of studies. was a study to scientifically study, like the hard sciences, the effectiveness of healing prayers. And I remember I read this article about it, or at least looked at it. A lot of it was statistics, and when it comes to me in math, statistics is math. We don't mix. But from what I could understand from the article that was not math related, basically they had various groups, and they had people pray for them. They had one group where people were told that they were being prayed for by another group anonymously. They didn't know each other. They kept it anonymous. Another group was of sick people were told, or people who had ailments were told that they were not being prayed for. No one was praying for them. And I think they had another group that was told that they were not being prayed for, but they did actually have a group, an anonymous group of people praying for them. Maybe that was like meant to be the control group or something. Or maybe they had a control group where no one was praying for nobody. I don't know. But anyway, this had, if you follow what I'm saying, they had these different groups. And then what happened was they followed the people through their illnesses. Did somebody who was being prayed for die? Or did their condition get worse? Or did their condition get better? You know, so they could record that. And then they would crunch the numbers and see, well, did the people who got prayed for, that people prayed about their illness to a God asking for healing, did their condition get better, worse, or stay the same? The people who were in the group where nobody was praying for them, same thing. That, I guess, would be the control group. Did the conditions get better, worse, or the same? And the people who were told they were not having anyone pray for them, but they actually did. They had anonymous people praying for them, but they didn't tell them that. Did their conditions stay the same? Did it get better? Did it get better? Did it worse? Okay. And then they looked at the numbers, and they crunched the numbers, and they wrote an article. If I remember, the upshot or the conclusion of the article was that people who, if I remember correctly, that the people who did have people pray for them and knew that they were getting prayed for didn't do very much better, apparently. The effectiveness of the prayer was, or at least their belief in the effectiveness of the prayer was not such that they did better than the other groups. So, you know, take it for what it's worth. I'd have to go back and read it to get more specifics about it. Yeah, so that would be an example of where they're trying to imitate the natural sciences by really kind of subjecting a religious practice, praying to a God for someone, to controlled situation, just like you would have in a laboratory or something like that. But that's the outlier. That is unusual. Usually in religious studies, as I said, you're going to talk to people. It's going to be very subjective. And you're going to do research on what people believe. Again, what people believe. You're not going to be trying to imitate the natural sciences and set up a laboratory to study, you know, faith healing and stuff like that. Although, as I said, they have done that. But like the natural sciences and like modern science, religious studies tries to be consciously neutral. It is a neutral form of study. At least it tries to be. You're not making any judgments, and I think I mentioned this already. You're not making any judgments on the truth or the falseness of the beliefs that you're studying. You're describing them. You're saying what people believe and what they do with those beliefs. But you're not there to say that you think it's true or false or right or wrong. So it's trying to be consciously neutral. And this one might be problematic, to be non-committed. It's a non-committed form of study. So they're not again, it's kind of another way of saying they're being neutral, is that you're not, just because you're studying Hinduism doesn't mean that you are a Hindu, that you believe in that religion of Hinduism. And that's why you're studying it. So it's not necessarily a committed form of study. You could be an atheist and just be fascinated by Christianity, and so that's what you study. Or an atheist and you're fascinated by Native African religion, and so that's what you study. But you're not committed to it. So it's non-committed as well. It's not concerned with making positive or negative, oh, I already kind of said this already, positive or negative true or false judgments. And religious studies also is not very much concerned with questions of what you might call facticity or truth. I say truth, but more facticity, say reality. Facticity. Whether something's this is just a fancy word for whether something is a fact or not, whether it is real or not. What is fact? What is truth? Truth is really just that you have a correct perception of the world. That's basically what truth is, that you correctly are perceiving what is in front of you. It's true. And fact can mean the same thing. If something is a fact, okay, then it's something that is, you can establish that it's true. All right. You have evidence for it that it is actually true. Not that you think that it's true, but that it is actually true. Because if you only think that it's true, then it's more like an opinion, not a fact. But if I can show you the sky outside and I say, well, the sky is the color blue. If you know what the color blue is, all right, I can take you outside and show you, look up, and there's the sky. Is it blue? Is it blue like the color blue? Yeah, it's blue. Okay, so then that's a fact. Why it's blue is another question. Now that's another question. But the fact of the sky being blue is the evidence supports the statement. Okay? Religious studies is not really concerned with facticity. It's not concerned with the reality. If I say that, by placing my hands on you, I can heal you from a sickness, cancer or whatever, okay. And for the religious studies scholar, that's what you're telling me you believe you can do. But that's not, whether that's factual or not is another question. In fact, that's not the question. Whether you can tell me, hey, I'll point to, or I can prove to you that God exists, or I believe God exists. Okay, the religious studies scholar, that's what you're telling me you believe. But for a religious studies scholar, you're not concerned with whether that's actually true, the factitiousness of it. It's facticity, that really is a fact, that there is definite evidence that a God exists, or the God that you say exists. Do these things really exist? Did these things really happen? Is what this person telling me really true? Those are not the questions that the religious studies scholar is asking. These are not relevant for religious studies. What's relevant is the visible, what you can see, hear, smell, experience yourself, and then describe. Doesn't mean it's not true. There may be facticity, The religious studies scholar might also be a God believer and say, yeah, I agree with you. I believe there is a God. There's evidence that there's the fact of a God. But that, as a religious studies scholar, that's not the question I'm here to address. I'm here to describe what your religious beliefs are and how they influence your life. So the awareness of, say, a God or the supernatural or the sacred that people claim to have or claim to experience in religion does not really matter. Doesn't mean it's not important, but it's not the focus of religious studies scholarship. If you want to do that, then you become a theologian. Okay? Theology is where it's a committed form of study. You believe in it. You argue for it. The fact that it is a fact matters to you. I mean, if you're going to be an Islamic theologian, well, you'd better believe that there's a God. Because the essential statement of faith for Islam is there is no God but God. That's the essential statement, that there is a God, and then by extension that there's only one God. So if you're going to be a religious studies scholar studying Islam, the facticity of that maybe doesn't matter very much. You can describe that belief. Yes, Muslims and Muslims believe this. But if you're a Muslim theologian, it is a Muslim who's a theologian, well, you better believe there's a God. Otherwise, then you're a heretic. You're not a true Muslim theologian because you're denying one of the essential aspects of the faith, one of the key facts of your religion. So these things don't matter so much for religious studies scholars, but it doesn't mean they're important. What is religious studies looking for? Motivation. What is motivating people to do these religious things? What are their motivations? What are the origins? Where did they come from? Where do they come from? Maybe I'll write these down. There might be more, but I'm going to write these down just because. Motivations, origins. Where do these practices come from? Where do they originate? In no particular order. This is just, one up with motivations. Motivations, what was the other one? Origins, did I say? Origins. What is the function? What do these things do for people? What is I've been mentioning prayer a lot as an example, but what is the function of prayer for people? Is it like what Sigmund Freud said, that it's just people talking to themselves? This great psychologist and psychiatrist. Or, is it more than that? Does it, when people meditate, for example, and they're able to bring their heart rate down or their breathing down to low levels, okay, that shows me the function of what they're doing. But what is the function of why they're doing it? What are they doing it for? Are they trying to enter into an altered state of consciousness? And what are the effects of what they do? Are there effects to what they do? What are the consequences? Like if a person meditates and achieves, has a low heart rate and a low breathing rate and achieves what he or she describes as an altered state of consciousness, well, what's the effect of that on them? What does it do for them? Does it make them healthier? Happier? So these are some of the things that a religious studies scholar will be looking at. Motivations, the origins, where things come from, what they do, function, and the effects, what they bring about for people. Now! Is not something being missed here? Could you not say that religious studies is by doing this and being like this, that religious studies and religious studies scholars are somehow maybe not fully understanding the object, wisdom be attentive, the object of their study? And in fact, I read an article about this by this dude, I have it written down here, C.T. McIntyre, How Religious Studies Misunderstands Religion. It was in a journal called Academic Matters, the Journal of Higher Education. I'll just write his name on the board so you can see. C.T. McIntyre. Sure that I'm spelling that correctly. Yes, I am. Okay, McIntyre. No, I do not know what the CT stands for, but he is a professor of history and religion at the University of Toronto, which is in the city of Toronto, and I actually attended there, not the University of Toronto itself, but one of the colleges, one of the universities that makes up the larger university of the University of Toronto. I was up there for 3 years. Very nice place. Very nice city. I hope to go back there sometime. I hear that they've just released all their COVID restrictions at the border, so I'd like to go back up there again. Yeah, it's a nice place. Dufflett's Bakery. If you're ever in Toronto, go to Dufflett's Bakery. Oh, yes, very nice. Very nice confectionaries. Not for me, because I'm fat. I'm trying to lose weight. But, maybe I can splurge a little bit when I'm up there. Anyway, so up in Toronto, so this guy McIntyre, and he wrote in his article this. If anyone, oops. Oops, I was pressing. I was pressing the right, and I needed to press the left. There we go. All right. Would anyone like to read that for us from his article, C.T. McIntyre's article? I'm trying to do it with my left hand, and it's just not working. I'm just trying to get myself out of the way here. There we go. Philistine. Hello. Does anyone want to read this comment from, yes, oh, I'm sorry, Ms. O'Connor, yes. Yeah, go ahead. Actually, you can read the whole thing if you want.
By giving as the first set item, religious studies shows a trick on itself. The effective use privilege a tendency to reduce religion to something like merely cultural, economic, psychological, social controlling, or power-driven phenomena, or to force the removal of religions to the stratosphere as otherworldly phenomena concerned with transcending spirits, gods, and heroes. Either way, religious studies fails to see religion as the dimension of human existence and the religions as ways of life of the people who live them. Insofar as this happens, religious studies neglects or distorts the religiousness of the religions as practiced and witnessed by the people studied.
Good, thank you very much. So that last point that he makes, maybe I should have put that in bold as well, that religious studies, ironically, he's arguing that it neglects the religiousness of religions. Why? By not taking the religiousness maybe seriously enough. Not that it has to agree with or accept what people say about their religions, like, yes, there is a God, okay, yeah, I'll agree with you, there is a God too, because I have to study you. Yeah, I believe that I can place my hands on people and heal them through prayer. Okay, yes, obviously you can, He's not saying that, but I think he's saying that you're not being sympathetic, or you're not getting into the mind of the people that you're studying. You're not necessarily understanding them. They're just objects of study that you're describing, like a biologist might describe, I don't know, a lizard on a rock. He can tell you all about the lizard that's sunning itself on the rock, what color it is, even its evolution from other creatures, whether it's male or female, in its mating cycle, all sorts of stuff. Why it's on the rock sunning itself, cold-blooded. But maybe not getting at what the essence of the lizard is, or the true appreciation of the lizard. I think, to use that analogy here, I think that's what he's talking about with religious studies, that it doesn't take seriously enough what people actually say they believe, because it motivates them. Motivations, what they believe motivates them. Whether a person believes in a hell or not, like a place of punishment after death, might be a motivating factor on whether that person decides to kill himself or something, or kill others. That might be enough to stop the person from doing it, or doing violence to another person, or to himself or herself, or themselves. That needs to be taken into account. How do you account for that? That seems to be something that goes beyond pure description, saying, well, Joe believed he would go to hell, so he didn't go out and kill someone, even though he was angry about something, or he didn't commit violence. Well, okay, that's a description, but I think McIntyre's trying to say that, does that really get at a really deeper understanding of what religion means for somebody? Because from religious studies, it's always just a story in a way. It's a story that people are telling themselves. And you as a religious studies scholar, kind of enter into that story, and you describe the story for others, but, facticity, it's whether it's real or not, it's irrelevant. He's saying, no, it's not irrelevant, because if it motivates people and inspires them, that's just as relevant as the descriptive. Okay? I think what he means at the top when he says that religious studies behaves as a first set item, I think you have the first set, which is the studier is the first set, and then the second set will be the things studied. Okay? Whereas I think he's talking about it should be the reverse. The studied thing is what's important. And you as the studier are entering into that and really trying to sympathize with it and truly trying to understand it. It's kind of like, it kind of makes sense in a way, because it's like getting to math, you know. I'm not the best at math, but I've heard people talk about math and they're passionate about it, you know. There are these people that just love it. Everything for me is pure mathematics. I could care for anything. I don't care about anything else. Or someone will say, everything for me is science. That's all I care. Show me science. I remember this. It was a climatologist. Or no, was he a climatologist or was he a physicist? It doesn't matter what he was. But anyway, he was a scientist, and he was just going on about as like with the kind of devotion that someone might talk about the Blessed Virgin Mary, you know, or Ganesh, or some god or goddess, you know. Not that the Virgin Mary is a goddess, Ganesh is. But, you know, the same way that a person might passionately talk about their belief in God or Jesus or something like that, all I care about is the science. For me, it's pure science. I heard this guy talking about it. And he should. I mean, if he's going to be like a physicist or a scientist, he should love his field, I would imagine. But it's almost like religious studies scholars, it's no. It's like, no, you've always got to keep this distance from the thing that the object that you're studying. It's like telling a mathematician not to love doing math. So they reduce, what do? They make religion into something that it says it's not. Religion is saying that it is about an ultimate reality. Whether you can test that or not is another question. You might be able to test it. I don't know if anyone's tried to test that. But, you know, religions are saying that they're about a supernatural, a non-normal reality, and that should be taken seriously. Whereas religious studies scholars, he's saying, don't really do that. They try to find, well, what else could this be? It can't be religious, so it must be social. It must be an artifact of society. Society is really God, and society is just dumping all this information or messages into your head, and you're reinterpreting them as religion, but they're not really religion. Or it's psychology. I mentioned Freud. You know, you're not really praying to a God. There is no God. So you must be talking to yourself. Okay? That was Freud's idea. Et cetera and so forth. But that's not really taking seriously what the people are saying is going on. It's just reducing them to something else. Or, and this comment about removing religions to the stratosphere, to the heavens, as, well, they deal with gods and goddesses and heroes. That's kind of like going the other way. And the one way, you're saying, well, they're just earthly concerns. Sociology, psychology, you know, economics, that's what's going on with these things. And then they just call them religion. They turn them into gods. The opposite thing is to say, well, they're gods and you know, heroes, great heroes in heaven and spirits. Well, we can't study those because those are unverifiable. So you can't really win with religion. Either way, religion is either reduced to something, or it's pushed up into something that either way, religious studies says it can't really study. It can just describe. And he's saying that something's being missed here. You're failing to see this as a dimension of human existence, a true dimension, not an illusion to people, I might say. I think I had another comment from him after that. Whoops, again. Yes. I'll read this one. My eyeglasses on. Or does someone want to read this one? Yes, thank you, Ms. Marquez. Yeah?
Religion and distance from one's own and other people's religion. The rule is to speak and third person about religion as if it were an object out there, removed from the lives of professors and students. The idea is the experience of the person of the scholar, and the production of universally valid and universally accepted scholarship about religion, representing simply the way it is, subject only to academic criticism and refinement. The effect, once again, is to mistake or misseeing the religiousness of religion as people shape their ways of life in relation to what they regard as basic and ultimate.
Yeah. Which they wouldn't do if they didn't believe it. If they didn't believe that it was fact or reality, people are not likely to do that. They're not likely to shift their whole life or parts of their life around because of a religious belief. If they don't believe it. I mean, and so description only goes so far. And the fact that, religious studies scholars are not supposed to talk about the religious background as if it's not an influence, well, if you are an atheist and you don't believe there's a God, that might be something you do want to talk about if you're going to be studying religions with gods. Because it kind of affects how you're going to tell that story, because you're talking for the people. They're not writing the article or the book, the religious studies article or the book. You are, okay? And if you are someone who believes that, there's only one God, and that believing in, like say you go to a Hindu temple and you see the idols, you see the statues, and you believe that those are idols and they're offensive, but you're going to study it because you're a religious studies scholar. Nevertheless, that's something that maybe it's okay to be open and honest about, rather than trying to say, well, I'm still this objective resource. Well, no, you're not. You're bringing in baggage with you. Or at least acknowledge the baggage and say, okay, but this is how I'm putting it to the side so I can study this religious belief I don't agree with or I don't believe in. This idea that you're there's totally detached from religion is not necessarily true. Now we're talking here in a course about religion and violence. I mean, think of the name of the course. It's not, well, why is it religion and violence? As I said, I think I mentioned this before. Are there any courses here at Fairleigh Dickinson that are like, poetry and violence, or economics and violence, specifically geared to like how poetry, especially of the French kind. No, I'm just saying. How does poetry lead people into violence and to do violent activities? It makes them so passionate. You're reading Alexander Pope and you just got to go kill somebody. No, but it's religion and violence, of course. No one even bats an eye. It's just like, oh yeah, of course, religion, violent, religious, violent, religious, violent. Okay, yeah. So we need to address this. How did I get off on that tangent? Excuse me. Because that's the bias, that's the assumption that maybe a scholar is bringing to it. Well, I think religion is violent, therefore I want to look at all these ways that religion can be violent. When you might not be being fair to the experiences you're looking at, and not really listening to what people are telling you about why they might be violent, which might not be religious at all, but it might just be religious people doing violence. Is there anything else I wanted to say about his comment? Well, I already mentioned that about the disappearance of the person of the scholar. Okay, so I'll move on from that. Oh, whoops. I will move on from that. Is there anything more I wanted to say? Yes. Could the fact that a religious studies kind of distorts what religion is in a way, doesn't take it maybe fully seriously, at least not seriously enough to treat it as if it's true. Because this never happens in other fields. I mean, you don't go into a biology class and the professor does not have to justify to you that there are living things and that you can study them in the classroom and have laboratories and cut them up. Although I don't know if they cut them up anymore. Maybe you do it virtually, or they bring in mock frogs that aren't real frogs but are made like frogs and you cut them up or something. I don't know. Nevertheless, no one has to justify that. It's like, yeah, it's biology class. Of course, there are living beings. But you kind of have to do that with religion. You have to kind of like, well, why are we studying this thing that I don't believe exists, but that I've given my life to studying? Could this have consequences for violence? Well, if people feel misunderstood or misrepresented, that might make them angry. You know, if they feel like their religiousness is being denigrated or put down, or they feel like they're just being manipulated, you know, I'm just a subject for your next book. I'm not saying that people would become violent, but they might feel manipulated, and manipulated is not a good feeling to have. Just thinking about this myself, I wonder if sometimes if there were a violent reaction, and maybe not physical violence, but violence in the sense of saying, get out of here, leave us alone, go from wherever you came from. We don't want you to study us anymore because you don't respect us. Does that reaction become like a self-fulfilling prophecy? I'm not saying that the religious studies scholar has to come in and say, okay, I believe everything you believe, and so whatever. No, I'm not saying that, but should be, I guess, honest about, okay, these are my faith commitments. Let's say I'm a born-again Christian. I'm not saying but say, you know, I'm a born-again Christian. I believe in Jesus as my Savior, but I'm also a religious studies scholar, and I want to study your religion. And, you know, I'm not going to agree with what you believe in, but I will try to be fair in studying it. I'm not going to act like somehow I have no biases, but this is where I'm coming from. Can you do that, or try to present yourself as, oh yes, I'm this objective scholar and I'm going to judge and tell you what your religion is about and where it came from and how you feel about it? And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, this violence or a violent reaction. Is the violence then kind of a protest against this? You refuse to understand us, so get out of here, go away. That was the question. Now, religious studies, interestingly, and this is an interesting aspect of religious studies. Religious studies, just based on where it came from, is cross-disciplinary. Because religion includes ultimacy, it includes just about every aspect, well, I shouldn't say just about, every aspect of human beings. So history, archaeology, psychology, societies. Okay, religion is there's a religious element. Religion can be found in all these areas. And so by its nature, when religious studies became a field in its own right, remember I told you in the 1800s, religious studies started becoming a field in its own right, the study of religion. It was already in its inception, in its beginning, cross-disciplinary, okay? It had to deal with other disciplines. Remember, Friedrich Max Mueller was a linguist, languages, okay? People like James Fraser, I wrote on the board his idea about, remember, there's the evolution from magic to religion to science. He was a mythologist. He was big on studying human mythology, human stories. And also a lot of other people who studied religion were and we're going to talk about a few of them now. Studied it from the perspectives of philosophy and sociology and psychology. So McIntyre, in his article, one of the things he praises religious studies for is that by using anthropology, psychology, all these types of things, religious studies can really claim credit for pioneering this idea of what they call nowadays multidisciplinary research, which is just a fancy term for, that you try to include the other disciplines, usually of the humanities, within your own. Okay, so, or even the sciences. So, for example, I don't know, if you're in an English class, English literature class, they might talk about what are the psychological influences that we see, or what's the psychology of, say, a particular character in the book. And to do that, they might refer to actual psychological studies and stuff like that, and bring that to bear on understanding the mind of a character in a story. Totally fictional character, but it's now multi and interdisciplinary. You're studying literature, which is humanities, but you're bringing in another area, psychology. Or if you're studying a book, a fictional book, but it's set in, oh, I don't know, Brazil in the 1600s, okay? You might bring in anthropologists or historians who can give you background on aspects of the book and what's going on that you would not have known just from reading the book, okay? So multidisciplinary, this is what's going on. Religious studies already was that from its beginning, because religion was so embedded, it's so embedded in every aspect of human culture and your life, that yeah, they were already using evolutionary science, evolutionary biology. They were looking at psychology. They were already looking at language study and stuff like that, and history. So that is one of the pioneering aspects of religious studies, that it was always a multidisciplinary research thing, if you will. So religious studies reach, and this is leading into my next point, which is that religious studies reaches out to many different areas of thinking for its study of religion. Some of these are, for example, philosophy. And now we get to the slide phenomenology. Whoops. I'll be right back. Wipe off the board. So we're looking at philosophy here. I'll start with philosophy. And, you know, with each of these, I'm not going to go into tremendous depth. This is just like a bird's eye view of each thing, okay? I'm going to take maybe one or two people that are significant and just talk a little bit about each one and how they studied religion. And maybe take, you know, well, philosophy, more specifically phenomenology. Whoops. What is phenomenology? It's the study of the phenomenon, the appearance of a thing to the human consciousness. So there's your definition for phenomenology. It comes from the Greek word phenomenon, which means appearance. So how something appears to the human mind. And so the question for phenomenologists, as philosophers, if they study religion, and some do, but the question for phenomenologists is there a unity behind the many expressions of what someone calls religion, behind all these expressions, these different varieties, these varieties of what is called religion? Is there a unity? Can we find a unity behind it? And phenomenologists usually do this by comparing things. They do this through comparative research. They take similar ideas or practices and they play them off of each other. They compare them to see if they, you know, when they put them together and shake them up, you know, something comes out, to see if there is a commonality between them. But this approach, phenomenology, that I'm just this area is purely philosophical. I mean, it's a consciously philosophical approach to studying religion. I mean, you don't have to use phenomenology for only, yeah.
Sorry, can you repeat the definition?
Oh, phenomenology, yes. The study of a thing as it presents itself to the human consciousness. So it's the appearance of something to the mind, basically. How something appears, phenomenon, appearance, how something appears to the mind. And what you want to do is you want to try to train the mind to see beyond the appearance to what is the true nature of the thing, if you can. So for this area of philosophy, for phenomenology, it's not, phenomenologists or phenomenological philosophers do not aim so much at explaining human experience, again, as describing it, kind of like religious studies. They don't explain human experience as much as describing it. It's not so much the question of, is there a world out there for me? Just as an example, is there an actual world out here that I'm seeing when I look at you all and look out the window or look up into the stars? Is there an actual world? But it's more, the question for a phenomenologist would be, how does the world appear to my consciousness? Okay, how are you appearing to me? Not whether you necessarily actually exist, although that might be assumed that you do exist. But how do you exist to my consciousness? You are the phenomenon. You are the appearance to my consciousness. And what I want to do is to sift out all those other things to try to get at what truly I'm seeing here. Because what I'm seeing are, I would imagine, human beings. But we're all very different in this room. Look different, different sizes, shapes, okay? So, but yet somehow the phenomenon of this diversity still presents some kind of unity to my mind of a human being. Why is that? How is that? And that's kind of like what's going on with phenomenology. How does it relate to religion? Oh, what I was going to say is, this is a philosophical study. This can be applied to anything, not just religion. But phenomenologists in philosophy, I guess it's usually been phenomenologists who have tried to study the phenomenon of religion itself specifically. And so that's why I'm mentioning it. But it's a broader philosophy than just dealing with religion. And we'll see some kind of overlap here with religious studies in a way, because phenomenologists are trying to remain detached and impartial. Whether that's actually possible or not, I'm not so sure, but that's the effort. The effort is to remain detached and impartial from the phenomenon. Why? Because you don't want to have your own judgments of truth and value intrude on the thing that's the phenomenon, the thing that you are studying. You don't want to, in a way, prejudge it as, okay, it already exists because I think it exists. So if a phenomenologist wanted to study the religious concept of God, well, okay, maybe the phenomenologist believes in God already, but you want to still remain detached and impartial from whether God exists, even though you believe in it, because you don't want that judgment to kind of, in a way, corrupt your investigation. If you arrive at God existing, that's fine. But if you don't, then I don't know what you do. If you're just spend the night at the bar. I thought he existed. So my phenomenological studies prove to me that he's all bunk. Not true. No. But that's the reason why you want to remain detached and impartial, so you're not imposing your own judgments. And you want to portray, in the case of religion, for example, and this is a benefit which religious studies could learn from to some extent. And I think they do. I don't want to sound so negative about religious studies, and what they do. But the goal is to portray religion, for phenomenologists, to portray religion on its own terms without reducing it to other things like, oh, it's just psychological or it's sociological, it's society telling you things. No, you want to respect the integrity of the object you're studying, the phenomenon, which in this case would be religion. And phenomenological study wants to re-experience the phenomenon. And this is interesting because, that's not typical for religious studies. For religious studies, you want to remain detached and neutral and non-committed. But for phenomenologists, it's okay to try to re-experience the nature of the phenomenon, to get some sense of what it is and be able to gain insight from it so that you can describe and interpret it. What that might mean, I don't know. I mean, that might mean actually participating in religious rituals rather than staying away from them, staying apart and just describing them, just witnessing them and describing them. It might be, participating to some extent, as far as you were able to. The person who is considered the father or the inventor of phenomenology or phenomenologist philosophy is this man, Edmund Husserl. I'm not going to say much about him. I'm more concerned with his ideas. But he's a philosopher, and I didn't put it on there. You can see his dates there, 1859 to 1938. He was a German mathematician and also a philosopher. And he was interested in concentrating on how things appeared to our human consciousness. He did not necessarily want to explain experience, but as I said, he wanted to describe the phenomenon that was appearing. I know that's redundant, but that was appearing to his consciousness. And what were the tools that he used? Well, he used these two things called epoche, or epoche, and eidetic vision. Eidetic vision. Now I have the E under here with underline, just so you recognize that it is pronounced in English. It's epoche or epoche, because it's a Greek term, and so it's pronounced. And you see right here, Greek, the ceasing of movement, or the suspension of judgment, from the Greek verb epecho, which means to hold back something. So you're holding back, you're suspending the movement of your mind, you could say, your judgment. Okay, and so epoche or epoche is bracketing. Sometimes people will describe it as bracketing. You're bracketing out questions of existence. Does it exist? Is it true? Does it have value? You're bracketing out those questions. You're not saying that it's not true or does not exist, but you're bracketing them out for the sake of argument in order to analyze the thing's appearance. Get an accurate picture of how it appears to your consciousness. And again, you can see some overlap with religious studies and how they want to study religion. That you're not necessarily saying that what you're studying is not true, but you are trying to keep a boundary around your own beliefs or how you see the world. You are performing epoche to hopefully get a clearer picture. Okay. Eidetic vision is his general term for this practice of trying to see objectively the essence of a phenomenon, go beyond the appearance to the essence. Eidetic vision. Eidetic comes from the Greek word eidos, something that is seen, a form or a shape, an image. Hence, this is where we get the word idol from in English. Comes from this word idol, comes from eidos, something that is seen, and that's what an idol is. It's a physical representation of a spiritual being, a god, a spirit, something. So you want eidetic vision, you want image vision, all right? You want to see beyond the phenomenon to the image, to the thing, or you want to see beyond the image, I should say, that the phenomenon is showing you, to what is really there. Beyond the appearances. Okay, so it's a tool. It's a tool to you. These are both tools. Bracketing out questions of truth, existence, etc., and epoche, and also eidetic vision, trying to see something, to kind of take away all the other stuff from the phenomenon, to kind of like, it's like peeling an onion in a way, although let's hope you get to a center, because there's no real center in an onion, but you know what I'm talking about, peeling away the outside of an onion to get to, hopefully, the center, the beyond the image. Okay, this is just, his basic philosophical idea. He's the father of phenomenology. But how is this, where does the rubber hit the road? Who takes some of these ideas and applies them very specifically to religion? Well, this man, Rudolf Otto. He was a theologian, so he was a believer in a certain religion, I guess Christian. I think he's Christian. And he was Prussian, like Immanuel Kant, and at least on this PowerPoint slide, I do have a picture of Prussia. So you can see Prussia goes all the way from, parts of what are Lithuania, Poland, okay, Poland into Eastern Germany and Western Germany, all the way up into Denmark. Might be, it's still Germany, okay. And these white blotches around here, these are like independent city-states and principalities and duchies and all sorts of things, okay. So they're not part of the Prussian Empire, but it was an empire because it straddled a large part of Eastern and Western Europe, and it included a lot of different cultures. It was basically German-speaking, and I think he is ethnically German, so it's appropriate to say that he's German, although technically he's Prussian. And he wrote a famous book called Das Heilige, which was translated into English as the idea of the holy. You can see there, when it was written, Das Heilige, in 1917, and then it was translated in 1923. Still online, you can find it's in public domain because of its date, and you can find it on the Internet Archive if you're curious. You can look at it. For Otto, and some of this will sound familiar because I talked about this when I talked about the sacred. All religion for Otto is based on the idea of the holy, and the holy could also be translated as sacred. We mean exactly the same thing. That which is set apart for the gods, an experience of great power or energy, force that has ultimate meaning for people, the sacred, the holy. And so all religion is based on this experience of the holy. Okay, so see how it's phenomenological. The phenomenon of religion, he's reducing, I wouldn't say reducing it, that's a bad word, but he's kind of trying to get around everything that he sees in the very diversity of religions, get at what are they all getting at? What are they all talking about? What are they all looking for, caring about? This experience that they've all of them say they've had of something that we call the sacred or the holy. That's the word he gives to it. And so religion is simply the history of how that experience of the holy has been expressed. Mythology, story, ritual, doctrine, teachings. Okay, these are the phenomena that you see, okay, that surround the nature, which is this experience of the holy. You have the experience of the holy, and around that you have all sorts of rituals and stories and teachings and people and all sorts of stuff going on. But if you you get around all of the other stuff, you see, it's the experience of the holy. This experience of the holy, he came up with a specific term for it. Whoops. I guess I didn't want to go. I wanted to go to this quote first. Does anyone want to read this quote from his book, The Idea of the Holy, which I believe I got off of Internet Archive? Yes, I know, thank you. I'll be with you in a second, my friend. Does anyone? Don't cause trouble, you. Does anyone want to read this quotation? It's acetone seek. Yes. Blank wonder and astonishment. Okay, should sound familiar, because when I talked about the sacred, a lot of what I was talking about was taken from him and his study of the holy and how it connects up with religion. Okay, remember, the sacred is not profane. It is something that is non-normal. It's not part of the everyday world, and it attracts us, but it also kind of pushes us away. We're afraid of it, but yet we're somehow attracted to it. In a way, it's kind of both beautiful and ugly at the same time. You know, it's something we don't want to see, but we can't not see, you know? That's the sacred. And that's what he means when he says it's the holy other. It's so completely different from us that the only really response that you can have is just have almost like your mind goes blank, and it's just complete submission in a way. Wonder and astonishment. Okay, so my alarm went off, so let's take 10 minutes, and I'll see you back here in 10 minutes. Okay, so Okay. I can actually stand back here. Alrighty. Let's see, where am I here? For the experience of the holy, his name for this experience he called the numinous experience. And you can see this on slide, PowerPoint slide. What is the numinous experience? It's the experience of the sacred as a feeling, a powerful feeling, a feeling of power that strikes awe and terror in a person, yet also causes fascination. And it comes from the Latin word numen numinis, numen numinis. You have to put the two forms on here because this is the subject form numen, and this is the possessive form numinis. You can see that in Latin it sometimes changes. So if you ever study Latin, you have to learn both forms. You always have to learn the subject and the possessive form just to know. But what does it mean? Well, literally it means a nodding of the head, a bowing of the head. I don't know why. If I had to guess, it might be maybe a bowing of the head out of respect to the spirit. But the numen comes to be extended to mean the Godhead or the will of God or just a spiritual or divine power. All right, and numines, which is the plural, or just say numens, or keep it simple. But numens were kind of like spirits of the farmers, the spirits of the soil, of the ground that you would till, that you would farm, and this was just a word that was applied to them. And if we think about Max Muller's theory about the words become the gods, yeah, this name for bowing of the head, some maybe physical practice you did in the presence of these spirits, then becomes the name for the spirits themselves. They are the numines, the numens. So this experience of the sacred he identified, well, he described it as, oops, why am I not doing that? Okay. He described it as well, in Latin, the mysterium tremendum et fascinans. Yes. Sure. What do you need to take a picture of? This one? Okay. You're welcome. I will, if you want. I mean, the PowerPoints are available on Blackboard, so if you print them out, you can just write on. If you think you can write on the printed out slides, and it might save you some time, so you're not trying to copy down. It's a suggestion. If I mention it, you do with it what you will. Okay, the mysterium tremendum et fascinans is what I said. I'll just write that down because I don't have it on the PowerPoint slide. It's a Latin phrase that he uses to describe it. Can you see me writing on the board? Mysterium tremendum et fascinans. Et fascinans. The tremendous and fascinating mystery. It invokes or invites both terror, tremendum, but also fascinans, fascination. And I just break down the words for you here on the PowerPoint slide. Mystery comes from Greek, which mysterion, which is a religious term. It means to be initiated. So where you are initiated into like a religion, okay? When that happens, especially in the ancient world, there were religions that were very secretive. And so to be initiated meant that you would learn all the rituals and the teachings that they would not tell the outside world. Okay? It was a mystery. And these were called mystery religions. Scholars call them that. So to be initiated, to be brought into, to be mueo in Greek, the basis for the word for mueo, to be initiated, to be brought into the mystery meant that you had all these teachings, secret practices revealed to you. So a lot of our terminology is in its essence religious in some way, shape, or form. Tremendous. Move my picture out of the way. Tremendous, from Latin word tremo, which means like a tremor, like the tremors of an earthquake, to shake. We're doing fasting. Yes? No? No one knows fasting? So to shake, to quake, to quiver, to tremble, tremendous, and fascinating, fascino, to enchant. Again, like a religious term, like to charm someone, to say magical words that will cause people to do things for you, or whatever. To enchant them, to bewitch them, or charm, fascino. The numinous evokes this profound, this big, you might say, creaturely feeling in human beings. It overwhelms the person. This experience of the numinous overwhelms the person with a feeling of his or her own nothingness in the presence of ultimate reality. Otto uses the expression dust and ashes. You realize that you are just dust and ashes. We are just atoms of carbon that have evolved into a higher form of life. But at the end of it all, in the face of the numinous, we are nothing. While the experience generates fear and scares a person, and that's what awe is. It's full of awe. You are filled with awe at this experience. You are fearful of it. But it also fascinates and it draws a person into it. Okay. What could this mean? I think that's before I move on to sociology. Whoops, now you're not playing nice, are you? Oh, because I touched the window. So there we go. There we go. Before I go on to sociology, what could this mean for religion and violence? Well, sacred power overwhelms me, according to Otto's definition. The numinous overwhelms me. By overwhelming, it means it could control my will and make me do its will. Could that sometimes involve killing? You know, that this tremendous mystery, this numinous mystery that I'm experiencing is more powerful than I am, and it's motivating me or telling me that there are certain times when I have to commit violence, especially if I need to kill to protect its value, or if the value of the sacred is being offended by somebody else. Am I now motivated by my experience, my numinous experience, to defend the honor and value of the sacred that I've experienced if it's offended? I think here, an example that popped into my head, and well, it didn't really pop into my head, I wrote it down, is in 2015 in France. It's kind of a satirical or a kind of like a funny little newspaper that, I should say little, I guess it's well known in France, called Charlie Hebdo, the Daily Charlie, we would say in English. And it's kind of like Mad Magazine. If you ever have heard of Mad Magazine, although I don't think they publish it anymore, or The Onion is another example. These are kind of like satirical or comedic magazines and newspapers that come out with just funny, silly stories, sometimes based on current events, but anyways. And Charlie Hebdo is based in France, and it's very anti-religious. I went online and looked at, because I wanted to look up, just for doing some fact finding, looked up some of the covers they previously had, and they're meant to be funny, but they're also very anti-religious, and they go after everybody. They go after Islam, Christianity, Judaism to some extent. But what got Charlie Hebdo in trouble in 2015 was images and pictures that which were intended to be funny, but they're also insulting pictures of the Prophet Muhammad of Islam. Well, I mean, for most Muslims, it's not proper or appropriate even to draw pictures of Muhammad, or sometimes even of the other great original founders of Islam. People like Ali, who was a relative, or well, wasn't a relative, I think he was adopted by Muhammad. He was adopted into Muhammad's family. But some of the original people involved with Islam, you don't draw their faces. They might draw their pictures of their bodies if the person is drawing a picture in a book or something like that. But out of respect, the face is not drawn. That's not 100%. There are pictures of the Prophet Muhammad in books, but it's very rare. It's usually out of respect. So the fact that they were doing this, and they're not Muslims to boot, the fact that they were also not Muslims, and then the fact that they were making fun of Muhammad on top of it, well, this was waiting for a response, I guess you could say. Hold on a second here. My nose is itchy, and I didn't put a handkerchief in these pants, so sorry. And so a French Muslim took a gun, and he went and he shot up the offices. And I forget how many people he killed. I think he killed most of the editorial staff and writers and cartoonists. I don't know that he killed everybody in the building, but certainly he killed a number of people, because they were there for an editorial meeting, if I remember the story correctly. So just like everybody who was there, and this guy got in and he brought a gun or a rifle or something and shot the place up and killed a whole bunch of people. And this was revenge. This was for having offended the sacred. which was the Prophet Muhammad, a sacred figure, a holy figure in Islamic religion. So, can the sacred motivate? The sacred is so overpowering to my will, it gets me to do things that maybe I wouldn't normally do because I have to defend it. Also, the sacred is usually conceived as eternal, it's long-lasting. There's a heaven, there's a life after life for me if I do this violent act in defense of the sacred. Whereas normal life is not. I'll die. But if I do this for the sacred, I can maybe enter into the sacred, which is forever. So death or dying for the sacred is not really a disvalue. It's not necessarily a bad thing over continued living without the sacred. If by not defending the honor of the sacred is going to remove itself from you, say, okay, I'm out of here, you don't care about me, and you lose it, or living with the sacred while the sacred has been dishonored, and you have that sense of shame because your sacred thing has been dishonored, maybe death or dying is not so bad because you're doing it for the right reason. You're doing it for the numinous that has overwhelmed you and given value to your life. I'm not saying that that's what should have happened. I'm not defending massacre or killing of other people. I'm trying to understand how the numinous what could that mean for religion and violence? So just so you understand what I'm doing here. I'm playing like a thought experiment. How could your experience of the sacred be motivating to do something like that? Why would someone feel like he had to do something like that to other human beings? Now, sociology. That's philosophy. Now we're talking about sociology. Philosophy, sociology, society, study of society. G. Yes, study of society, but here's my longer definition. The study of the social aspects and constructions of human behavior. In short, society. The word society and sociology is based on this word socius in Latin, which means like a friend. You can basically translate it as friend, but a companion, a partner, a comrade, or a friend, I guess you could say. And that's kind of like what a society is. These are people who are companions to each other. They find themselves into a group of people who have common interests or common history. They're a society. Move me out of the way again. The father of sociology is the man pictured there, Auguste Comte. Auguste Comte. You can see when he lived, 1798 to 1857. I know that kind of looks like a prison picture, or he got picked up by the cops, but that's not the case. You ate one too many croissants. Now you go to prison. Okay, no, this is just the information for where I got the picture from. Okay, but this is a picture of him, and I believe it's an actual picture of him from the 1800s. So an early form of photography, very early form. But Auguste Comte, he's considered the father of sociology, and he was a French philosopher. And just like anything, as I told you, it's the modern period. So you have the natural sciences. Everybody wants to be like the natural sciences. Comte, no less. So he wants to have a scientifically appropriate way for studying human society. And so he came up with sociology. He coined the term. He made the term. And he modeled his system on the natural sciences. In fact, his first name was not sociology. He called it physique sociale, social physics. Okay, so like you have material physics, this was social physics. So just like you can study in a laboratory, or theoretically you can study physics, the matter and energy that we have in the universe and how they interact, you could study human societies in the same way, the physics of human relationships, physics sociale. So social physics, but later it became the study of society, sociology. Comte believed, or I should say Auguste Comte. Comte means he was a count, which is an aristocratic title. But anyways, people usually use it as his last name, even though I don't think technically it is his last name. Anyway, so I'll say Comte. Comte believed that by observing human society, one could arrive at rational explanations of social life and to the organizing principles of social life through observation, just like any of the natural sciences. So for Comte, as for early sociologists, I guess I would say, religion is really a construction of the society in which you find yourself, which is another way to put that is that religion looks very much like the society in which it came from. Okay? So really, the society gives you your religion in a way. Society creates the religion. And Comte's view was based on his belief that he thought that religion and theology would completely disappear as modes of behavior. He didn't think, and this was not uncommon. A lot of people thought with the coming of the modern sciences that there would no longer be any need for religion. You would go away from religion and people would rely on science, which some might say has actually kind of happened. And he believed that his study of sociology would replace theology, the study of God, as the source for human society's guiding principles and values. So it wouldn't be God that would give us the guiding principles for how our society should be run. It would be the results of sociological study and research. That's what he thought. You can see it with a lot of these, maybe not so much with phenomenology, or maybe not at all with phenomenology, but you'll notice with some of the things I'm talking about, like sociology and psychology and anthropology, you'll see a lot of kind of negativism towards religion. In each branch, they usually think that their group is going to get rid of religion, and then all you'll need is psychology. All you need to do is go to a counselor, and that will solve all your problems. Or if we just understand human culture as anthropologists, we'll see what the purpose of religion is, and religion will kind of maybe still be part of culture, but not as influential. And here's with sociology. Sociology will replace religion as the prime guiding force for how human society should be and how it should act. Well, none of that has really happened, but that's kind of, that was kind of the view. Religion was kind of old hat and old school, and certainly no one wanted to be out of date, which meant being religious. Okay. There we go. Emil Durkheim is the person I'm going to one of the people I'm going to focus on here. I'm going to focus on two people, Emil Durkheim and Karl Marx. Emil Durkheim, 1858 to 1917. He came from a devout Jewish family. His father, his grandfather, and his great-grandfather were all rabbis, but he did not become a rabbi. He decided to become an academic. And he is also considered one of the, well, I shouldn't say that because that might not be true. He, wrote some major books. You see there, The Division of Labor in Society, The Rules of Sociological Methods. So he helped to lay the foundation for sociology and how it should be. But he wrote two interesting books, or two books that are of interest to us here. And a lot of these early thinkers did this. They started, they kind of cut their teeth, in a manner of speaking. They kind of got their beginning with religion, writing about religion. And so he had two books here, Suicide and the Elementary Forms of Religious Life. I'm going to talk about suicide. I might talk about elementary forms of religious life if I can remember what it's about. But we'll see what happens. Suicide is interesting. You might not think that it had anything to do with religion, but it actually did and does. He was interested to see, why do people commit suicide, and did religion play a factor in who committed suicide? And he looked at two groups. He looked at Protestant Christians and Catholic Christians. And his question was, why, if people in each of those groups commit suicide, why do they do it? And it was in a way, it might be surprising. Which do you think, and why? Tell me why. Which group do you think would be more likely to kill themselves? A Protestant person or a Catholic person? Scott. Tell me which and tell me why. Yeah, who do you think is more likely to kill himself or herself, a Protestant or a Catholic? Who said that? Okay, Protestant. So you've identified which group. Why?
I'm not very religious myself, but for some reason I've heard that things such as suicide is like a sin. I don't know. I could
Okay.
ruling out of proportion.
Okay, you've heard that suicide is a sin.
Yeah, like really heavy people who follow that religion, Christianity, Catholic.
So do you think that Protestants will be less likely to kill themselves, or more likely?
Personally, I don't think that either. I don't think it's like measurable. I don't know.
Okay. Interesting. I mean, if you have, but I mean, a lot of times at hospitals nowadays, they will ask your religious affiliation. So, attempted suicide is a complete suicide. I know it's kind of morbid to talk about it, but if it's completed suicide, you wouldn't know. You'd have to ask somebody else, not the person. But, okay, so you're not sure. Could be either way? Either way. Okay. Protestant, Catholic? Why do you think so? Yes.
I'm not like she said, I'm not really I have much knowledge on the Catholic religion and stuff like that, but from what I grew up knowing, I felt like Catholics had more rules, or it was more stricter on their end, and I feel like maybe somebody who's going through something might feel like they're disobeying all the rules or something, and they're doing something essentially wrong. That might be the reason why, more than just Protestant.
They would feel guilty.
Yeah, more guilty, because I feel like from what I kind of, it's just there's a lot more standards.
Yeah.
That you must meet.
And that it's just easier to end it. Is that what you're saying?
More there's more pressure.
Pressure.
And that sense. It's kind of what I'm thinking.
Interesting. Makes sense. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Maybe the Catholic community is much larger, that they have more pressure if they do feel guilty enough to want to commit something like that themselves. Meanwhile, that's my guess. I feel like Protestants are not likely to.
And that's okay. I mean, it's because I know you're saying, I don't have a lot of knowledge about it or whatever. Whatever knowledge you do have, even if it's maybe wrong or whatever, but it's still knowledge. You still know something, and that's good. That's interesting. So they have a larger community and people to go to. Okay. Is anyone coming down on the side of the Protestants? What you might know or not know about Protestants? Huh? You don't know nothing. Well, you know the term. You know enough that you don't know anything about them.
But I'm saying I don't really know.
Yeah. That's okay. Well, go about your impression. What's your impression? You think it's Protestants? Why do you think that?
I'm not sure, I'm just saying, because I'm a Catholic, and,
Yeah.
and I don't know. I know there's rules that you gotta follow, but it's also like you said, there's a lot of like prayers that you could go to and ask for forgiveness, like if you did something, you could go to the church and like everybody, you have people that help you pray about what you did.
Throughout history, Protestant churches practicing more Western ideals. So throughout history, compared to Catholicism, really deep rooted into the culture. In a sense, because of the throughout history, Protestant churches have picked up. I think sort of what he says, like society's kind of picked up. Religion comes from society into religion. I think Protestants would be a little more.
Because they're more Western.
Yeah.
And what do you think? What is it about Western society that makes them more prone to suicide?
I think it's this idea that it's like a religion is a me thing rather than a community kind of thing. I think when I think of community.
Yeah, me and Jesus. Yeah, Jesus is my Lord and Savior, not our Lord and Savior. Interesting. Well, together we have kind of arrived at the answer. Okay, which is yes, that surprisingly, at least for him, I guess, he found that in the instances where it could be identified, the person's religious affiliation could be identified, Protestants were more likely to commit suicide than Catholics, at least in France at that time. And for the reasons that have been stated, that in Catholicism, there was an integrated society, okay, that you were a part of, whether you practice or not. There is a community of people. You're part of a much larger community than just yourself. Even in heaven, because there's the belief that not only are you a member of a community here on earth, and you have the priests, the clergy you can go to, you have your family, you have all the other Catholics who are around, you can ask to pray for you and stuff like that, light candles at the church for you, have a mass said for you. But you have the saints in heaven. You have the Blessed Virgin Mary and all the saints, the apostles and the saints. So it doesn't just end with earth. You also have heaven. And there's also the belief that you have a companion, a guardian angel who's with you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, praying for you and supposedly helping you in your life. So you've got that. Whereas, yes, as Ms. Castillo said, and maybe some other people said, with Protestantism, there was more of an individualistic focus. Not saying that there aren't groups as well, but it was very much more focused on your relationship, your individual relationship with God. You don't need priests to pray for you or forgive your sins. Yes, suicide is a sin, Ms. O'Connor, so that would probably keep a Protestant, I would think, from committing suicide, because then you're dishonoring the sacred, you're breaking God's law. But Protestant Christianity is kind of isolationist in that sense. It's focusing more on your individual personal relationship with Jesus or with God. And also that it doesn't allow an outlet for these disordered feelings, for feelings of shame or guilt, feeling bad. You can tell somebody, but Jesus loves you. Don't you know you're saved? Did you give your life to Christ? Yes. Well, then you're saved forever. Yes. Okay, that's true, and that can give people comfort, but there's no outlet like you find in, say, Catholicism, where, as I said, you can go to a church and ask a priest to say a mass for you. You can go to a church and light a candle. You can pray a rosary bead or say a prayer to a saint and ask that saint to pray for you to God so you're not alone. Also, Protestant Christianity sees the Christian as already saved, which can also kind of make you feel worse. Because if you're already saved, the work has been done, Jesus died on the cross for you, you're saved, why do I feel so bad? I shouldn't feel bad. I shouldn't want to kill myself. It can make you feel even worse. Okay, so Catholic Christianity has a support system that isn't generally there within Protestantism. At least the Protestantism that he studied in France, because there are different forms of Protestantism. Like if you go to Episcopalian church or an Episcopal church or a Lutheran church, maybe not so much a Lutheran church, but some Episcopal churches look very much and act very much like Catholic churches in some ways. It depends. Some are more Protestant, some are more Catholic. It depends on what the local pastor likes or doesn't like. But that's what he found. Interestingly, that's what he found in his religious study. Did I want to talk about the elementary forms of religious life? Well, not really, because it doesn't, I mean, it does deal with religion and his theory of where religion comes from, but I'm not sure. Well, yeah, it does actually have connection to violence. Okay. Well, the thing with, to boil it down to one thing for Durkheim, in his study of religion is about what he calls the totem. And basically a totem is an object of worship or veneration. Worship or veneration. Why? Because it represents the group. Do I have a better definition? Well, I'm just writing it down. It's not so much a definition as a description. It's an object of worship or veneration. Why? Because it's a representation of the tribe, of the group that you belong to. And how did he come to this conclusion? Well, he did some studies of, he did a study of a group of tribesmen in Australia. He did not go to Australia, but he read a book by someone who did go to Australia and studied these people, these tribesmen living there, and then he came up with his theory. That's just how they rolled back in the 1800s. And, you know, I can understand it. I mean, it's easy for me today to look back at that kind of chuckle and, oh, he read a book, you know. Okay. But you have to imagine, you know, look at his dates. He died in what, 1917. So he could have gone on a boat and gone to Australia, and you know, maybe like a year or so later he would have finally gotten there, and then it would have taken him a year or whatever to come back to France. So it wasn't easy. He couldn't just get on an airplane and go there. So he had to rely on others. So what was his theory? That religion is totemism. And how do you describe it? Well, basically with totemism, a group identifies with a certain object. Let's say an animal, like a rabbit or something. And that becomes like the symbol of your group. You know, we are the rabbits. We are the rabbits. And this creature, say a rabbit, because it is your group, it becomes sacred. It is now untouchable. So you don't hunt it, you don't kill it, you don't harm it, because to do that, you're kind of like harming yourself and your group. Except that you can kill it on some occasions. But to do that, you have to do it with all sorts of rituals. So this is where religion comes in. Religion provides the avenue, provides the context, the arena in which you can kill the totem object and eat it. I mean, you have to eat it as well because you receive its power by eating it. And the power then goes into the group, okay? And this is done in ritualistic fashion. So there might be certain times of the year when it's permissible to kill the rabbit and to eat it. Okay. Sorry, I just had like a flashback. I don't know. Has anyone ever seen Bugs Bunny cartoons? Yeah, you ever see the one, is it the opera one, where Elmer Fudd is chasing after Bugs Bunny and he's singing, "Kill the wabbit, kill the wabbit, kill the wabbit." Ever see? Yeah. So I just thought of this flash dummy when I was like, kill the rabbit. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, you're allowed to kill the rabbit on certain times and certain ways. So here's where religion comes in. What does that have to do with religion and violence? Well, it could show that violence is embedded into religion. It gives permission for violence at some times, and in certain cases, if I had to think about it. So totem. It makes it permissible at certain times to kill what you would usually not kill. So, should you kill human beings? No. No. But in some human cultures, yes, you could for certain reasons, certain religious reasons, you could. So religion could be seen as a direct motivator for violence towards other things, other life forms. Karl Marx. Why do I want to talk about Karl Marx? I'm not sure. Well, just because he's so interesting. But anyways, Karl Marx, 1818 to 1883. He was a German. I don't know where he was born, so I'm not sure whether he was a German, like the German Confederation, or if he was Prussian. No, he was born in he was from Eastern Germany, right?
I think it was
Leipzig. That was part of Prussia, wasn't it, at the time? Okay, so I know where Leipzig is. Isn't Leipzig where they make marzipan? Oh, no, it's Lübeck. Oh, yeah. Oh, I got to get me some marzipan. It's Halloween time, so it's okay. It's okay to have marzipan, some candy. Anyways, Leipzig. So, yeah, I'm going to assume that it was Prussia. But nevertheless, don't quote me on that. Karl Marx, he was of German ethnicity. Karl Marx, I'll read this. Religion, this is a famous statement he makes. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature. Religion is the heart of a heartless world, just as it is the spirit of a spiritless situation. It is the opium, the drug of the people. The abolition of religion as the illusory happiness of the people is required for their real happiness. So we have to get rid of the illusion that religion creates of people being happy in order to bring them to real happiness. So for Marx, religion could be seen as a form of violence in and of itself. I'm right there with you, sister. It's getting late. Religion could be seen in and of itself as a form of violence, as a drug, even opium, a form of drug that enslaves people. He kind of describes religion as a chain around the neck that has pretty flowers on it, and people see the flowers and they smell the pretty flowers and say, "Oh, aren't these pretty flowers? Don't these pretty flowers smell so pretty?" But what they don't see is the chain that the flowers are attached to around their neck, that they're slaves. Yes, they're enslaved by religion. Religion makes them think that they're free, but they're really not free. They're under other people's control, and these other people use religion as a means of control. Okay? It's as I said, it's the sigh of the oppressed. There's a better place for me somewhere. Oh, the spirit of a spiritless situation. Oh yes, Jesus will make everything all right. That's what religion does, but it's really a lie. I mean, Marx was an atheist. It's a lie. There is no God. There is no heaven. There's no God to make things right. There's no God to punish the guilty at the end of their lives. There is no heaven for you to go to where you will benefit from all the suffering that you had in life, but now you'll receive glory and happiness. No, it's not going to happen because they don't exist. So what religion does is it makes legitimate the unjust and the harsh control of the ruling classes. those who control the means of production, those who own the factories, who own the corporations, the job makers, who make you feel like you kind of owe them because they're creating jobs for you. So shouldn't you appreciate that more? So it mystifies. It turns into a mystery. What are the true origins of human oppression? It tries at the hands of the rulers. It tries to make it seem like, don't look over there. Look here. See all this incense and smoke? Let me blow it in your face, Mr. Pay. But don't look over there where you see that people are, stealing your stuff and robbing you blind and keeping you oppressed and in chains. That's what religion does. It gives you a false sense of optimism. But instead you have to get rid of religion. When you get rid of the illusion, then you see things as they really are. And we can find examples of this perhaps in religions. For example, Hinduism. Nowadays, the country of India, which is where the majority of Hindus live, almost a billion. It might be, maybe it's 900. There are over a billion Hindus worldwide, but I think in India itself, India proper, I think it's around 900 million. But still, the great majority of the population of India would identify as Hindu or somehow connected to the Hindu religion. Well, in modern India, there is no class system or caste system, as it's called. In India, that you had castes, which were various classes of people. There were rulers, there were warriors, there were merchants, and then there were all the others at the bottom. Artisans, laborers, farmers, all those types of people. Artists, they're all at the bottom. Don't talk about the outcasts, because they were not even part of the caste system. In fact, they were so out of the caste that the ones who were in the higher levels of the caste couldn't even look at them. That it would make them unclean. It would defile them to even look at some of these outcasts. So you had this very rigid, strict class system. I mean, you could not marry outside of your caste. So a person who was in the top caste, say a ruling caste, could not ever marry an artist from the lowest caste. Just could not. It was forbidden. And there are also certain jobs that you could and could not do. Even within the various castes, there were certain jobs. And so it's very complicated, and it was, for Karl Marx's perspective, it was oppressive. But it was validated because of religion, because it came from the gods. In the religious texts that the Hindus had, it talks about where the caste system came from. And, in the beginning, in the creation of the universe, this primordial man, this primordial human being, this kind of, say, first God in a way, was cut up. His body parts were cut up, and like the head was made into the top caste, and the chest was made into the next lower caste, and then his loins and legs were the next caste. And then, of course, the bottom castes were the feet, the dirty part of the body. Because you're walking, no one had shoes, so the feet were dirty all the time. So this could be an example. Hinduism, this is my example, this is not Marx's example, but applying Marx's ideas, you can see how he could say, look how religion mystifies this whole thing of oppression, where you have people who, if you're born into the bottom caste, that's it for life, baby. All you can do is pray that you come back as a higher being in your next life, and come back as a higher caste. But in this life, this is where you are, this is where you're going to stay, period. At least until modern times. According to the modern constitution, or the constitution of the Indian Republic of India, the caste system has been abolished. But it still exists. It still very much exists. I mean, you can go online, and it's interesting, you can go online and find like Indian newspapers online, The Hindu is a national newspaper from India. You've got the Times and stuff like that. Go into their dating and marriage pages, and you'll see the ads where it says, Kshatriya, they'll say from the Kshatri class, the warrior caste, and, because you have to marry within your caste. It's still very much ingrained into the Indian mind. You can't marry, don't even try to marry a foreigner, like someone who's not Indian. That's an even bigger no-no. Like, someone Spaniard or someone from Spain or Western Europe is an Indian trying to marry, say, an Indian woman. That's probably not going to happen. At least that won't be accepted by the family. So the caste system is still there. That would be an example, I think, of violence in a way. And religion is violent for Marx because it drugs the masses. It keeps them drugged in a way. Promises them a reward in the afterlife, or gives them an escape through rituals that they uses rituals to escape, for people to escape from their suffering. But the fact that the chain has pretty sweet smelling flowers on it does not make it any less than a chain. What can this mean for religion and violence? Well, as I pointed out, with Durkheim and suicide, religion can be an antidote against violence. Religion can be the solution to violence. For example, in the case of, say, suicide. So, what does Durkheim show? He showed that some forms of Christianity, in this case Catholicism, but that's just the way it is. That's just the way his study shook down. It's not trying to say that Catholicism is necessarily better than anything else. But in his case, Catholicism acted well in addressing issues of self-harm, parasuicide, people attempting suicide, or self-harm. So there was a benefit. But if we look at Marx, religion can be a form of oppression. It can be used to say that the oppression is okay and support the oppression. But if religion is supporting oppression, does that then justify me trying to overthrow religion? Then the question becomes, are we not then asking for me to be, is it not entailing violence, but from the non-religious side? And so you see that with much later, after Marx was dead, he died in 1883, but when you have communism, the communist regimes, first in Russia, then in China, then in other places in the world, they violently overthrew the religion. I mean, blew up churches, went into the churches and took axes and hacked at the sacred pictures, and destroyed them. Killed religious people who still wanted to be religious. They said, look, I believe it. Well, you're just deluded. Opium of the people, baby. You're just drugged and you don't realize it. So, we'll take your priests, and we'll send them out to the snowy Siberia and put them into prison camps for the rest of their lives. Because they're enemies of the state. They're trying to keep you oppressed. So we'll oppress them. So how is it not that the violence is now going the other way? It's going not from religion, but going against religion. Oh. Let's see how far we can get. Let's see. Don't get that far, I think. Here's an example of, we call it propaganda. Of course, when it's like Americans and Uncle Sam, we don't call it propaganda, right? But when it's other people's propaganda, we call it propaganda. But this, whatever. This is a picture from China, and I have a friend who's from Hong Kong, so he was nice enough to tell me what this means. Does anyone read Chinese? Anyone? Because I don't read Chinese, but no. So he told me what it means. Break the old world, create the new world. So you see this man dressed up, and it kind of looks military, but I just think that's the way Maoists dress, the Maoist political party in China, that people dress that way. But here he is with a sledgehammer to destroy the old world, and people are behind him, kind of like rooting for him. And but the question is, what is the old world that needs to be destroyed? I don't know if you can see it here, but I think this is a record, a phonograph record. So I'm not exactly sure what that's supposed to mean. Dice, so gambling, where you fritter your money away. But here we have, a Buddha statue. Here we get into religion. We're smashing the Buddha statues. Look, a cross, Jesus on the cross. We're smashing the cross of Jesus. The Christians who are from outside, the outsiders, the colonizers from the West. So this is the new world we're going to create with a sledgehammer. We're going to destroy and obliterate Christianity and Buddhism, these religions, from China, so that we can have a renewed China, one that is not an oppressed China, oppressed by religion. So here we see the violence going the other way, against religion. Okay, and so my buzzer went off, my alarm went off, so that's that. I will see you next week. Have a good week.